Jason Redman. He is a retired Navy SEAL who was wounded while deployed in Iraq.
So in September of 2007, I was literally at the height of my career. Everybody in life at some point is going to walk into an ambush. Some sort of catastrophic event that's going to rock your world and have this impact on your life. The majority of people who walk this earth have never wrestled with an enemy combatant in the deep blackness of night. I quickly realized I was helpless. I was totally pinned down in front of my guys, and there was nothing I could do. I would have given anything to be out of this situation. That day became a benchmark for me. It changed everything in my life. I realized in that moment that I got a second chance at life. Most people, you only get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. In an ambush, we talk about the point of attack. It's called the X. The reason I survived the one that I was in is because we got off the X. And I said, okay, let's drive forward. We can do this. But everybody out there will go through life ambushes. And these are these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Because we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. How am I going to bring in some revenue right now? We can't make rent. I've felt it. I realized the mark of a man is not found in his past, but how he overcomes adversity and builds his future. But the great thing about major life ambushes, they also can define you and make you better, just like that ambush that I went through. If you can create balance in these 5 key areas of something I call the Pentagon of peak performance, I guarantee you, you will be ready for any ambush that comes along. When I was wounded, I had gone through that journey where I had colossally failed as a leader, where I had guys say, kick him out and take his trident. It is the hardest road I've ever walked in my entire lifetime. But it built tremendous mental leadership. The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. So this emblem is the Navy SEAL Trident. And there's a lot of SEAL speakers that are out there now. So what makes me unique beyond them? There are 2 things that make me unique beyond other SEAL speakers. Number 1, very important, I am the only Navy SEAL out there who has not shot Osama bin Laden. So, I mean, I would have loved to have been there, but every time I turn around, I got another SEAL brother that's coming out going, yeah, I shot bin Laden too. Number 2, I am a very unique individual within the SEAL teams because I was a leader who failed at a high level and stayed and endured the hard journey to come back and overcome my failures to earn back the trust and credibility with my teammates and leave at an incredibly highly respected level. September of 2005, I found myself at a perfect storm within my career, a storm that I had created through a series of bad leadership decisions that culminated with a bad leadership decision on a combat mission in Afghanistan. And you see, my enemy that had come together to make this perfect storm was 2 of the most insidious enemies of leadership: ego and arrogance. And I found myself standing in front of my commanding officer, senior leadership, to hear 2 phrases that rocked my world. The first one was, Ensign Redman, we question your leadership, operational, and tactical abilities. And the second one was, we should take his trident. Now, you have to understand that the Navy SEAL Trident is probably one of the hardest emblems to attain in the U.S. military, and probably one of the hardest insignias to attain in the entire world. It takes, on average, 4 years from the moment you say, I'd like to be a SEAL, to the time you actually earn that emblem. We have an 80% attrition rate. There's only a little over 10,000 men ever who have worn that emblem on their uniform. And I was standing in a room with people who pulled the rug out from underneath me and said, you do not deserve to wear it. You are dismissed. We will let you know your fate tomorrow morning. And I staggered back to my room at Bagram base in Afghanistan, stunned, as my entire world collapsed around me. And I convinced myself in that moment that it was the end. I contemplated suicide as I sat in my room. And finally, thank God, I kind of slapped myself out of that. Because it is interesting how so many of us in life have been in these same moments. These moments where everything we have put into so much time and effort, whether it's relationships, whether it's with our kids, whether it's in our business, whether it's in our physical health, and something comes along that jerks the rug out from underneath us, and we convince ourselves it is the end. I've watched it in companies. I've watched it in leaders. I've watched it in moms and dads. I've watched it in husbands and wives. And as I sat there thinking about this, I realized, don't give in to this darkness. It's never too late. You always have the ability to overcome. And I realized that every moment we have in life that we think it is the end, if we embrace the journey, it actually becomes a new beginning. So I humbled myself, and the next morning I reported back, and they said, we're going to keep you, and we're going to give you some creative rehabilitation. And one of those things was a one-way ticket to an amazing vacation in Fort Benning, Georgia, known as U.S. Army Ranger School. And at Ranger School, I learned some amazing things about myself because I finally went back to the basics of what it is to be an effective leader. And as I started Ranger School, I wrote down 3 rules that I was going to follow and I was going to adhere to no matter what happened, no matter what negativity I heard, no matter how many times I heard teammates say, I don't want to serve with that guy. I don't want to follow that guy. Because you see, a great leader before I left said to me, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. And I wrote down these 3 rules to follow that plan. Rule number 1, I had to get back to focusing on leading myself, on making sure I put structure and discipline into all aspects of my life, and to make sure that I motivated and inspired others around me by my actions in everything I did. And the great thing about rule number 1 is it lends itself directly to rule number 2, which is our ability to lead others, which really is the essence of leadership. It is our ability to motivate and inspire others to be greater than they ever thought was possible. That is what any leader in any company ever wants to do. And then the last one, and the most important, and something that I had failed to do when my 2 demonic friends, ego and arrogance, have reached up and choked me out, you have to lead always. You have to lead in every situation. You can't just pick and choose when you're going to be a leader. Every action you take, every word that comes out of your mouth, it impacts your credibility as a leader. So once you put on that leadership hat, you have to lead always. And I started to follow this plan. And over a grueling 3-year period, I slowly but surely but effectively earned back the trust and respect of my teammates until finally in the spring of 2007, I was given the honor to lead one of the most amazing warrior troops I've ever had the honor to lead into Iraq, fighting in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq, literally the wild west of the Iraq during the war in the 2006-2007 timeframe. I stepped into Iraq to lead these men, and almost every night looked like this. On September 13, 2007, I stepped into a vicious enemy ambush with my team. We were 1 week from going home. I had done it. I had come back. I had beat all the odds. Everyone had said quit. Everyone had said get out. And I had achieved this high level of leadership and got in my career back on track. And on September 13, 2007, I got on the receiving end of an enemy ambush and I was shot 8 times in a gunfight. I took rounds across the body armor, I almost had my left elbow shot off, and I took a round in the face that almost took my life. Less than 5 days later, I found myself in Bethesda Naval Hospital, struggling to deal with what had happened. To think to myself, I just went through this horrific life journey to get my life back on track, and now I have doctors telling me they're going to amputate my arm. I was trached, I was wired shut, I had tubes coming out of every orifice. They were feeding me out of a stomach tube. I was too weak to even get out of bed. I had to have nurses help me to go to the bathroom. And I started to feel sorry for myself once again, and I telling myself, it is the end. And then once again, I slapped myself out of that, and I said, you know what? You've been through a harder journey. This will be another new beginning. You just have to drive forward. And I just started to think back to that ambush. I started to think back, how did your team survive? How did we make it through that vicious firefight where we ended up having call fire air missions directly in on our position? You see, my entire adult life, I had trained to take the fight to the enemy. And when we take the fight to the enemy, one of the things we do is we try and pin them to a specific spot and location that we call the X. And we try and pour as much overwhelming firepower upon them until they're so overwhelmed, they're either unwilling or unable to fight back. Well, on September 13th, I found out what it was to be on the receiving end of that. But fortunately, in my special operations career, we had been taught a single principle to survive moments like this. And it is, you have to get off the X as quickly as possible. And as I laid in that hospital bed, feeling sorry for myself, trying to figure out how I created this new beginning, a thought dawned on me. While I had survived an enemy ambush, everyone in life goes through life ambushes. Everyone in life gets ambushed. They get that rug pulled out from underneath them. They feel like it's the end. Everyone in life gets stuck on the X. And I realized in that moment, as I laid in that hospital bed, the principles are the same. Whether you run a company, whether you are a mom, a dad, it doesn't matter. Because the mechanics are the same. And the reality is, that vicious montage of gunfire and explosions, when you get into your life ambush, and most of you in this room are old enough, you've already been through at least one, you felt the same way. And if I hooked you up to a heart rate monitor and an EKG and a brainwave monitor and a breathing, something that measured your breathing, and I was next to you in my firefight, they would be almost identical because the human body doesn't process, oh, I'm in a gunfight. It only processes, I'm in a crisis. I am in a life ambush. And the bottom line is we have to get off the X. One of the greatest things working with companies, teams, organizations, and individuals across this country is by teaching them this principle, they don't just get off the X and survive. The ones who get off the fastest thrive. They launch from it. And they learn so much. And if we can figure out how to do this within our companies, within our teams, within ourselves, within our families, you will be ready for any life ambush. I teach this principle all across the country, and there are 3 things to be ready for a life ambush. Number 1 is to build a culture of the overcome mindset. It is a mindset within yourself that it doesn't matter what adversity, what change, what crisis, what failure occurs, you will overcome. Accepting that it may not always be the outcome we think it's going to be, but that we are going to move forward. Well, how do we achieve that? We achieve that through preparation, training, building our mindset, training our people to be ready for these unexpected moments when they come, and we do it through balance, something I teach called the Pentagon of peak performance. If you bring me into your company, I will teach your people, from CEOs down to mail clerks, how to be effective leaders. Because if you have an organization and a culture of leadership, it will build and feed an overcome mindset. And I will teach you how to get off the X and overcome all. I am blessed to have been able to tell my story in the New York Times bestseller, The Trident, which recounts my journey of leadership, failure, catastrophic redemption, catastrophic injury, and then coming to understand you can lead from any position, including a hospital bed. And my new book, Overcome, releases on December 10th, and it is all about getting off the X and preparing yourself for the failure crisis and life ambushes that are coming, whether they are coming physically, personally, or professionally. I want to thank you guys for having me. God bless you.
Jason, thank you. Thank you. I personally would like to take this moment, and I'm sure each and every one of you in this